Hey there, boys and girls, and welcome to another episode of Luthorville. Where the heck are you at? Oh, there you are. I got lost. Well, of course, no, I didn't. But I never get lost, which is why I am the perfect person to make a video about how to not get lost in the desert when you're hiking, or when you're hiking in the woods, or anywhere else for that matter. But just because I never get lost doesn't mean that other people don't have that kind of a problem. For example,
it was a road trip gone horribly wrong. A young woman lost in the Arizona desert for 5 days, filming her struggle to survive on her cell phone right up until the moment she thought she would never see her loved ones again.
Diana Bedwell and her husband Paul were lost in the desert for 2 weeks, stranded in their car.
Next tonight to the grandmother stranded for 9 days in the Arizona desert. ABC's Clayton Sandell on what she did that saved her.
That's when Paul took what he thought was a shortcut through the high desert. Here's where they were going, but look where they ended up, miles off course. As they were driving, the paved road suddenly turned into a dirt road. Diana had begged her husband to turn back.
50-year-old actor Dave Legeno passed away from heat stroke in Death Valley in 2014. He starred in the Harry Potter films, played a werewolf in those movies, and as you can see, the guy was in really good shape, but nevertheless, the desert can be a very dangerous place. As you can see, there are a lot of people who have gotten into a lot of trouble getting lost out in the desert. I'm going to divide this video into two sections. Basically, the first part is going to be how to not get lost, and the second part is going to be what to do in case you do get lost. One of the pieces of equipment that you should definitely bring along with you is a handheld GPS. For example, I have a handheld Garmin that I actually used to find Luthorville when I was searching for property. I had no idea where the heck I was going, so I put the GPS coordinates into the handheld GPS, and I had parked my motorcycle many miles away because I was a bit nervous about riding down all the dirt roads and all the sandy desert roads with the motorcycle. So I parked near the asphalt and I walked for miles and miles through the desert, having never been here before, and used my GPS to figure out exactly how to get there. And the really cool thing about a handheld GPS is that you can also drop basically an electronic marker that marks where you're starting from. So that's exactly what I did. I marked exactly where the motorcycle was at, and that way I was able to use the little compass feature, walk out to the property, and then once I was there, I was able to easily turn around, use the compass to get me right back to the motorcycle. So I highly, highly recommend handheld GPS devices. They're really great. Another thing that you might want to use is a plain old paper map and a compass, right? If you have a map, it's got some landmarks on it, you kind of get a general idea of where you're at, and you have a good old handheld compass. Once again, it is a great way to prevent yourself from getting lost in the first place. Another important tip about not getting lost is simply looking for landmarks. Now, I almost hesitate to give that advice only because it is so incredibly obvious, right? I would hope that most of you don't need to be told to look for landmarks, but nevertheless, there are some people who are very directionally challenged, and that kind of advice can actually be helpful for them. Now, looking for landmarks can be easier and it can be more difficult depending upon where you're hiking and what the terrain is like. Out in the desert, it's actually really easy because most of the desert tends to be wide open spaces. You're just going to be looking for a mountain peak. You're going to say, okay, there's that mountain is over there, and I can see that mountain is there, and I know that I parked the car in this spot in between. So that's pretty easy. It can be a little bit more difficult, say if you're hiking in the woods.
I grew up in Ohio, and it's not as easy when you're hiking in the woods to spot landmarks because a lot of the woods all kind of looks the same. But nevertheless, you could still do it there. You can pay attention to, okay, the creek I know is over this way, and I also know that there's some cliffs over this way. You can still pay attention to the landmarks, so that's another thing to just be aware of and be cognizant of when you're hiking around. The next piece of advice is one that you're probably going to be kind of surprised by. It's going to seem kind of silly, but fairy tales. Fairy tales offer very good lessons in life, and they can also offer very practical lessons, such as leaving a trail of breadcrumbs or popcorn. It sounds silly, but it could actually work. Yes, I know there's a possibility that some critters might come along and eat your popcorn trail, but in all honesty, if you're out for an hour or 2 hour hike, that's probably not going to happen. And even if they do, they're probably not going to eat the entire trail. So bringing along some breadcrumbs, popcorn, stuff like that is actually a really great idea to be able to track your way back. Now, if you would rather do a more modern technological version of that, what you can do is take a action sports camera, right? Like a little GoPro or that type of a camera. And you get the headband mount, and you don't mount it on the front of your head and take video of where you're going. No. The last person in your group mounts it on the back of their head and has it pointing backwards. So that way you have video of where you came from. See? Thinking. Smart, right? So that way, when you get to the end of your hike, you can just play that video backwards and you'll see the route that you took right back to your campsite, right back to your car, whatever it happens to be. So, those are some of my best pieces of advice for not getting lost in the first place. So, finally, we're going to get to all the stuff that you should have if you do get lost. Now, the first thing that you want to do, and this is one of the most important things, have a cell phone that is fully charged and keep it turned off. Do not turn that cell phone on for any reason other than an emergency. That's why you have it with you, okay? Don't be texting people, don't be taking pictures with your phone, because your phone could be the one thing that helps to rescue you if you get into trouble. So take your phone with you, fully charged, and do not turn it on. Leave it off the whole time. The second thing you want to do is get a texting app that allows you to text multiple people at once. That way, once again, if you do get into trouble, if you get injured and you're hurt and you need somebody to come save you, and you manage to get a cell phone signal, well, who are you going to get a hold of, right? You don't know which one of your friends might be available. So if you have one of those apps that allows you to text like everybody in your contact list all at once, use something like that. Now, there are many different apps out there, different kind of emergency apps, ones that'll ping people if you don't respond within a certain amount of time and things like that. I'm not going to go through the list of everything that's available, but keep that stuff in mind. Get something like that on your phone to use in case you do get in trouble.
Let me clarify. I know some of you are thinking, well, wait, that's stupid. Contact emergency services. You don't contact your friends. Well, here's the thing. You hear these stories all the time of people who get lost and they're losing their cell phone signal, so they call emergency services and the signal drops, right? And they don't get to complete the call. So if you have a really strong signal, definitely contact emergency services. But if you have a sporadic kind of weak signal, it's better to use some kind of group texting app. Contact as many of your friends as possible, so hopefully one of them can complete the information and can complete a call on your behalf. You see, that's the idea. So use the texting thing for your friends if you have a weak signal. If you have a strong signal, definitely contact emergency services directly.
Another thing that is a really smart thing to do is to use a satellite telephone. Now, a lot of people don't even know that those exist, and to be honest, satellite phones are pretty darned expensive, and their monthly plans are pretty pricey, but just like regular cell phones, they do have an emergency service which is free. So you'll drop a lot of money to get the phone, but if you do have an emergency situation, you'll be able to use it. And the great thing, of course, about a satellite phone is, just like the GPS device, it runs off of satellites. It doesn't run off of cell phone towers. So it will work almost anywhere. If you're on a hike and you're in a valley in some mountains where you can't get a cell phone signal, a satellite phone will probably still work. Another thing that you can get to allow yourself to communicate in case you get into trouble is a handheld ham radio. Now, that might be better for a lot of people than the satellite phone because ham radios are a lot less expensive, and it doesn't cost very much. It's not really difficult to get a ham radio operator's license. So you just take a test, you fill out some questions, you pay a fee, you get your operator's license, and then you're allowed to use a handheld ham radio, something else that you can use to call for help if you get into trouble. Obviously, another thing, hopefully I don't need to tell people this, but I'm going to tell you anyway, just to cover all the bases. Water, right? Make sure that you're bringing water with you. Now, a lot of people will also say, oh, bring some food along. Well, sometimes, if you're doing like a little hike, you don't want to bring a whole backpack with all kinds of food and water and all kinds of stuff like that. And remember, as I've talked about in other videos, the rule of 3, right? Everybody knows the rule of 3 in survival situations. You can survive for approximately 3 minutes without air. You can survive for approximately 3 hours from exposure to the elements. You can survive for approximately 3 days without water and for 3 weeks without food. So food is not nearly as important as water in a survival situation. So make sure that you bring some water with you. Now, again, you might think, well, that's not that important. I'm not going on a long hike. Okay, let me give you another example of why you might get into trouble. Let's say you're out on a hike and you twist your ankle, right? It's not broken, but you're kind of gimpy now, right? And you're limping along, and that hike that was going to take you an hour to get back to your car is now going to take you 4 hours, right? So you don't need to call for help. You're going to be okay. You can make it, but it's going to take a lot longer. If you don't have any water with you, you're going to really wish that you did. And having that water could be the difference between having heat exhaustion and not having heat exhaustion when you get back to the car. So bring some water along. Another really cool electronic device you can get is a personal locator beacon, or a PLB. Now, there are a few different brands out there, and these are basically to use as an absolute last resort. They will send a signal to the nearest rescue services. So when you hit the button on your PLB, did I say that right? Did I get the initials right? Yeah, PLB. I didn't want to say like PBL and get it wrong. But your personal locator beacon, when you hit that button, helicopters are coming, emergency crews are coming. I mean, they're going to come rescue you. So, like you said, that it is a last ditch effort. If you're really in trouble and you're not going to make it, you have one of those. Hopefully that will be able to save you as well. Another thing, a little thing, but it's really important, is extra batteries, right? Bring some extra batteries along. And, of course, a flashlight, another kind of obvious thing. Like the example I gave earlier, right? Maybe your daytime hike ends up turning into a nighttime hike because you were injured and it's taken you a lot longer to get back. So make sure that you have a flashlight. Make sure you have extra batteries for the flashlight and extra batteries for your handheld GPS. So that way you don't have to worry about the batteries dying when you're trying to get back to your campsite or your vehicle. And the final 2 things, a pair of binoculars. I know, again, it seems like kind of a silly thing, like, what do you really need? But yeah, binoculars can actually be very helpful if you're kind of lost, if you've been keeping track of know where all the landmarks are at, right? And you don't know exactly where you are, but you kind of remember the landmarks. If you pull out a pair of binoculars, you might be able to go, oh wait, yeah, now I see it, right? I'm a little too far away without them, but with the binoculars I can see that's where I need to go. And then finally, take along a little tablet. Like, why would you need a tablet? The other advice that I gave earlier about the camera mounted on the back of your head playing back the video, well, most of those little action cameras you can't really see very well. They might have like an incredibly tiny, like 2-inch monitor on it. If you have a little tablet, well, you could plug straight into that and use that to play that kind of video back. So that's it. Those are all my tips on how to not get lost in the first place and how to get rescued if you do get lost. And my final piece of advice is mitigate your panic, okay? A lot of times people think that they're lost when they're not, all right? Case in point, when I was about 14 years old, I was on a hike in the woods in Ohio with a friend of mine and his father. Now, I knew exactly where we were. I was very comfortable with those woods, and I had never been in this part of those woods, but I was so familiar with the place, I was fine. My friend's dad actually started freaking out, and I witnessed for the first time that kind of panic and fear and anxiety as we got off the path, and he was like, he's like, I've lost my sense of direction. Now, I'm looking at him like he's nuts because, like I said, I've never gotten lost, and I was like, well, all we got to do is go back that way because, you know, I knew which direction we were headed and which direction we had come from. But it was like as soon as we lost a path, he lost his mind. He had no idea where we were or how to get back. Just chill out, relax, stay calm, and don't get scared, okay? Because, like so many things in life, if your ambitions do not scare you, well, they're not big enough. I know that made no sense, right? That made no sense as an ending, but I always say that as my line, so I'm still sticking with it. Anyway, thanks for watching. Now, how do I get out of here? Now, I know where I'm going. I know exactly where I'm going. Always do. Always do.